The post 9/11 stuff I did, kind of like these Victorian fairy tales called, The Miscreants of Tiny Town. It was, like, meant to be, like, kind of children's book illustrations, and it was kind of about those undercurrents of fascism. And then it was, like, in 2015, when Trump got elected, those undercurrents of fascism kind of were just out in the public now. It's like, "Oh, here it is." And so those children characters that I had, they kind of exploded. Like, oh, the fascism is happening. These kids are spontaneously mutating into something else. They're like mid transformation. And though we don't really know what like the final form these kids are going to take are going to be, we're kind of like left as still images. Just like look at the eruption.
Welcome to The Creative Asylum, a weekly podcast that digs deep into the minds of visionary creators of all stripes. Musicians, actors, filmmakers, writers, artists, cartoonists, and cultural disruptors. Here, we'll discuss perspectives of living life on your own terms. Life lessons that keep us grounded, insane, and sometimes pull us back from the edge. So, take a deep breath, loosen your grip on the bland and the boring. This is your weekly prescription for authentic living, creative clarity, and hopefully, a little bit of cultural rebellion.
Side effects may include spontaneous joy, existential epiphanies, and an uncontrollable urge to do weird and beautiful things.
Hey, everybody. It's August 25th, 2026. My name is Daniel, and you are in the Creative Asylum. Today's conversation is with an artist that I absolutely adore from St. Paul, Minnesota. His name is Alex Kuno. I first became aware of his work about a decade ago and bought a piece from him 9 years ago. His work, it's very singular. When he first started out, he was probably kind of in that big bucket lowbrow or pop-surrealism. It's a pretty big bucket, and I don't really like dumping hundreds of different artists into this singular category because I don't think it's very fair to the individuality of the artists. And Alex Kuno is a very individual artist in his vision and his world building. It's very fantastical, psychedelic, I suppose you could say. He incorporates a lot of medieval religious iconography in terms of his figures, but he mixes it with this whole other sense of wonder and fantastic weirdness. You feel like you're in an alternate universe looking back at some sort of illuminated manuscript, but in the current day. Anyway, we have a conversation about how he became an artist, what propels him through his artistic journey now. And, well, rather than bore you with my voice, let's go over to this conversation with Alex Kuno. Hello, Alex. Good day. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'm super psyched. Been a fan of your art for longer than when I first bought a piece from you, which now I guess has been like 9 years.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It
Yeah.
feels like 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah.
I absolutely still love the piece and have just continued
Oh.
following your work. And, when I decided to do this podcast, I'm like, well, I know I want to have artists, and the easiest thing for me to do initially was just look around, see who are my favorites that I have on the walls.
Yeah.
And you're one of them.
Well,
So
thanks so much. Yeah, I'm really happy to be here. And congrats on the podcast. It's been really cool to see like some of the guests that you've been having, like Yarbo and stuff like that. That's very cool.
it's starting to come together. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it really seems like it.
It keeps growing. And, I'm hoping that the fans of Alex's here will subscribe.
Yeah.
So anyway, as I think I mentioned to you before, these conversations are unscripted. They're just like you and I meeting for the first time. I guess this is, we've never really talked before,
it is,
right?
yeah. Mhm.
But your work has such a unique and kind of fantastical and at the same time kind of dark quality, all stuff that I just personally adore. At what point did you start drawing? And I guess more of that, like, at what point did you decide, like, this is what you want to do with your life
Yeah, yeah.
as your career?
Well, yeah, I think, I mean, I've been drawing literally since I was a toddler, and I was really kind of obsessed with it. There are like early childhood photos of me like really stressing out over some bird or something like that I was working on. And then, And then I think like I was into acting and writing and stuff like that in high school. But then thinking about going into college and then into college, I was just kind of like wondering like what I wanted to focus on. And then I just kind of decided that I really whatever I kind of set to focus on for the rest of my life is that I still wanted to have like that feeling of when I was like a little kid in my room, just like escaping from the rest of the world, you know? And so like now that I'm doing this full time, I'm kind of going, oh my God, I'm making a living by just escaping from the world and, you know, kind of like creating a different world that I can kind of control. And so that's sort of what I was just been focusing on. And then I think I had no plan about what I wanted to do or how I wanted to focus my artwork.
Mhm.
Um, I was just kind of processing the world through doodles and sketches, and then finally, I just kind of had to do it full time, or else I was going to go crazy. So that's kind of what I did.
Have you always had that kind of fantastical, let's call it psychedelic, I guess,
Yeah, yeah.
world building, all that just kind of minute detail? I mean, a lot of it seems to almost come from like dreams or something. And
hmm
I'm just wondering if that was always embedded in the work or if that kind of crept in at some point.
Yeah, yeah. I think when I was little, when I was a kid, I was really obsessed with science fiction and stuff, and so I was very intense in that kind of world building. And then, yeah, as my style just developed, as I was an adult, I was just became more and more obsessed with like Northern Renaissance painting
Yeah.
and icons, like Orthodox icons and things. And so I'm always kind of referencing that kind of imagery in my work in one way or another that has to kind of like creep in. So I think that's sort of where the medieval feel of my work is kind of like referencing a lot of illuminated manuscripts and things like that. But the psychedelic aspect, I think always kind of like ran parallel to that too. I was always just so fascinated by those icons and that idea of just religious artwork. And never having grown up with a religious background at all, I kind of felt like I was missing out on something.
Hmm.
And so that Northern Renaissance religious artwork was like, I was kind of like looking at like aliens, kind of like
Yeah.
trying to tell us something from the past or something, and not being able to like understand, like, why is this woman about to be decapitated? And what is this monster coming out of the sea? Like, what is all of that? And so I think I tend to look at my work as being religious paintings without any God in them. They're kind of like, just perpetually like, I kind of thinking the more I work on it, eventually I'll come up with my own, creation myth or my own, stories. And so I think like, yeah, I think that's kind of like the slant that my work always kind of takes on. It's like,
So basically, it sounds like you're going to eventually just be starting your own religion.
yeah, yeah, I think so. And just kind of just for me personally, yeah. I'm making my own little illustrations for my one person cult.
Outside of the kind of medieval sort of influence, are there specific artists along the way that have either as a kid or as an adult really kind of either influenced your work or just your thought process or
Yeah.
anything?
Yeah, I think early on, of course, there was like the Hieronymus Bosch and Bruegel, and some I do have like really direct references to
Hmm.
specific paintings sometimes, but I'm really attracted to those kinds of physics, I guess, in the way that the bodies are proportioned and where they're looking and how they're posed. I kind of echo that a lot in my work
Right.
too.
In terms of format, like the piece I have is, I believe it's all pencil.
Okay, yeah.
I think. And, there's another artist like right here behind me. Let's see.
hmm
There we go. That's Lori Lipton. And
Oh
that's
yeah.
one of the, actually, she was the first artist interview that we did on the podcast was Lori. She
Oh,
works,
okay.
she works almost entirely in pencil, which is,
Yeah. I love her work a lot,
and are
yeah.
you still working a lot in pencil or are you moving more into sort of painting?
Oh, man, well, I've moved away from pencil quite a bit. I think like since the pandemic, that's when I really tried to branch out and take different mediums more seriously. I think for like many years I had really tried to cram as many art supplies into a painting as possible. Like
Okay.
could kind of mimic that early childhood experimentation of like markers and crayons and ballpoint pens and things like that. But then I think when the pandemic happened, I thought, you know what, I'm really gonna try like to actually focus on
On painting.
specific mediums. Yeah. And so it's like I really studied a lot about like the proper way to do watercolors or, gouache and things. And then I finally started to experiment with oils. And then the more that I go on with that, I think the more that I'm sticking with oil paint as I work on. I keep trying to like stick with one medium for a year. When I start a body of work, I have to think about like what medium is the body of work. If I'm working toward a show or if I'm trying to do a series, it's like I try to stick within a particular medium for that.
So you don't typically, if you have a show coming up, you don't necessarily work on a body for that show that has pieces in different mediums. You stick with the
I stick with, yeah, and
okay.
I try to stick with one like theme that I kind of see each show as kind of like an album, I guess. And so it's like each piece is sort of a song, and so I want to keep them together. Yeah, I want to have like a through line aesthetically, and like from the kind of the ground up with like the canvases and the panels, and
You're primarily working in oil these days.
these days, yeah.
And have you done stuff with acrylic or mostly just oil in
A
terms
lot
of
of
painting?
acrylics too. Yeah, a lot of acrylics too, and so I kind of veer in and out of that. And with my the tool posters that I do when I do remarks for those, like that's kind of where I use like acrylics to do the original artwork on top of the posters.
Okay. Yeah.
And then as I was working in that, then I kind of veer acrylics into my work too. But I think like sometimes how I work is like I would do a show in watercolor and then working up to that, then I would either get too frustrated or bored or find it limiting, or I'd get frustrated with the limits of that. And then I would go to acrylics for the next show after that, and then I'd focus on acrylics, and then I'd get annoyed and wish that they behaved more like oils, so then I'd do a show in oils and then get annoyed by the frustration and the time-consuming nature of that stuff. And so when that show's over, then I go back to acrylics, and then and it's been that cycle, but I want so
Okay.
badly to be able to, like, really focus on that and develop.
One of the interviews we did was with an artist named Chet Zar,
Yeah, mhm,
the monster painter.
yeah,
And,
mhm,
talking to him, he's like, oils. Like, yeah, I used to do
yeah,
that, but now, like, he's fixated on that's all I want to do because
yeah.
he said, it takes a good while to master it, but once you do, it's like magic.
Yeah, yeah. I've had little flickers of that, of like going, the best work that I've ever made has been in oils, and it's just by nature of the medium. It's like, and you use those different techniques that is the best part of watercolor, the best part of acrylic, or the best part of gouache is kind of like in oil, but oil is its own thing. So you're kind of stuck using that.
Right.
You're stuck using it. You can't like it's difficult to like mix different mediums with oils. So
hmm
yeah.
I feel like you have to have real patience for oil painting.
Yeah. Yeah, but and then in some ways, like when it clicks, it's the easiest one to use too.
Really interesting.
Yeah, mhm. It can be, yeah.
So you're based out of where?
St. Paul,
Okay.
Minnesota.
Oh, so you got to see a bunch of that ice crap that was going on,
Sure
or
did.
or I
Yeah.
guess it's still going on.
Yeah, it's going on everywhere.
It's
Yeah,
just
weird.
the news isn't really, it just seems like Minneapolis, St. Paul, the news was all over it, and then we changed.
I think maybe they learned that bragging about it and showing it off wasn't really the best move politically, so they're doing it undercover now. Yeah,
It's
but
I think it's all bad politics as far as I'm concerned.
yeah, bad morals, bad ethics,
Bad.
bad.
It's just bad.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. You've always been based out of St. Paul.
Yeah, for the most part, I moved to New York City and like a week before September 11th happened, and so I like lived there for a few years and then moved back.
Yeah.
But that really affected. It wasn't just like 9/11, but it was the aftermath of 9/11 that really. And then moving back from New York to Minneapolis and seeing how the country had changed in such a short amount of time, that really affected how I saw my own work and what I was trying to comment on,
Changed
I
in
think.
terms of what?
One of the aspects of the war on terror after 9/11 that really kind of affected me personally. I think it was like this idea of just how like childishly we were being treated as civilians after that happened, where there was kind of this fairy tale aspect to the propaganda that we were getting about how the terrorists, they wanted, they hated us for our freedoms, and we're going to bring justice, and like all these like really overly simplistic kind of condescending terms that like affect people on a really primal kind of genetic sort of storytelling level.
Right.
um and it's
Good
so
good
effective, and
versus
so
like good versus
yeah,
evil.
good versus evil, yeah. And then at the same time we're using this good versus evil rhetoric, with the Abu Ghraib stuff, and all the legit torture things. That was really,
It's ugly.
it's super, yeah, really ugly, and it just really kind of gnawed at me. And so that's kind of where I had like these kind of fairy tale images
Okay.
in my work, and it was kind of yeah, but kind of the grotesque fairy tales kind of came in, and it was really kind of thinking about I grew up in this kind of small suburb in Minnesota, and at that time it was there was a really bad kind of white nationalist streak that was going through that time when I was in high school, and seeing that stuff being inflicted on these other on civilians and just kind of random people uh during the war on terror, I was kind of like thinking about this white nationalist undercurrent in the politics and everything that was being said in all the propaganda. And Eric Prince, and Blackwater, the how that emerged, or like when there would be companies that would stamp Bible verses on the bullets, in the gun, or Bible verses on bombs to drop them on villages and stuff like that. And I knew that it's like such an ancient cycle, but it was just to like see that under this kind of candy coated mythology that America was sort of like perpetuating.
It feels
Was
to me like we're repeating that again, like we're in
yeah, oh yeah,
another cycle of exactly the same sort of well,
yeah,
yeah, everything about the Trump regime is lazy. He's
lazy and ugly, and yeah.
he's lazy. He's lazy,
Hmm.
which I think is sort of a blessing because if he wasn't and he was surgical and focused, things would be that much worse.
Yeah, but it's kind of like the machinery that's operating all this stuff
Yeah.
depends on him being lazy and sleepy, and being as much of a distraction as possible. And
Well, I
uh,
think it
um,
depends on him not actually having any sort of actual focus or moral intent of any kind.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
that's I've always felt about Trump that ultimately he doesn't really stand for anything outside of his own
hmm,
interests,
yeah,
you know? So
yeah,
yeah, because he's lazy, people like Russell Vought and all these people are able to sort of get away with a lot of
yeah,
stuff because he's like, "What are you doing? Oh, never mind.
uh-huh. Yep,
Never mind. I have some grifting to do."
yeah, yep,
So you are making a living full time
yeah,
doing your art,
hmm,
correct?
yeah.
And
Hmm.
how long have you been able to say that? Like quite a
Oh,
while?
yeah, 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 at least 10 years I've been doing it full time. It's only been maybe the past 5 or 6 years that it's been where I'm not like just dreading waking up in the morning, or like barely making it to rent. Like I do have some stability now and some comfort.
Which is
Yeah.
good. All focused artists should have that opportunity, you know.
Yeah, yeah, that has been really eye-opening and clarifying, but at the same time, it's a different form of dread. It's like now, anything can happen nowadays. So
Yeah, but I mean, you
yeah.
have representation now, don't you? Gallery representation.
Nothing really formal, but I work
Okay.
with a number of galleries. And
Okay.
I've worked with kind of a number of galleries that is just kind of I've just had like a good steady working relationship with them.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I was in Seattle a
Oh,
couple of trips ago. I think one of your shows was launching at the Ergo Gallery, and it was like
yeah. Hmm.
literally like the day before I was leaving, and I wasn't able to make it just because my schedule didn't allow,
Hmm.
but I wanted
Oh,
to, you know.
yeah.
And I'm actually trying to remember where I bought your piece from. If I bought it from a gallery or if I think I
I
bought it
wonder
from
if
you
you bought
direct.
it from me directly. I think we
I
talked.
I
Yeah.
think so, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. I'm also trying to remember where I first saw your work, and I don't know if that was at a gallery Have you ever shown at La Luz de Jesus in LA?
Early on, yeah. I think I had one piece out there, like, years ago when I was starting out, yeah.
Wonder if it could have been there.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not
Mhm.
sure. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So the tool thing,
Yeah. Mhm.
how did that happen? Did they become aware of your work and they approached you, or
Adam Jones just, he was collecting some of my work or I noticed that this guy with a blue check mark was following me.
okay?
I wasn't, like, that familiar with Tool that much. I listened
Uh-huh.
to, like, all the music kind of in Tool circles since I was a kid, but I liked what I heard on the radio, but I never, like, I was more into, like, experimental industrial noise stuff.
Like who? I gotta.
Like, late '80s, early '90s, kind of Skinny Puppy or In Stürzen und Neubauten
Uh-huh.
and, SPK and,
All right. Yeah.
um, yeah,
I'm
stuff like that.
hoping to have a conversation here with Blixer Bargeld if possible.
Oh my god. Well, that would be a real that would be a delight, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, oh, wow, that's really exciting. I can't wait to hear that.
Well, we shall see. It's like, fingers crossed.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
right.
We'll see.
This guy was, collecting my work, and then, finally, I just checked his name and, "Who is this guy?" And then I went, "Oh my god, oh, yeah, how about that?" Oh, okay." And then, just one day, he just asked me if, I could do a poster, for one of their shows. And he just DM'd me on Instagram, and then, I did that one, and then what he said afterward was kind of like it was based on what the poster collectors, their response to, like, the remarks that I was doing, because I really kind of invested a lot of time in those and, like, trying to recontextualize the image of the poster, and so I tried to add new, narrative elements and things like that, and so Adam, I think, really appreciated that, and he appreciated the feedback from the collectors, and, then after that, he just kept asking, and, then after, and now I've done, like, about 14
Oh
posters for
wow.
them.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
Can you describe what a remark is?
It's, a remark is, I had to learn it too. I didn't really know until I was asked to do them, but they're just paintings, they're just original doodles or original marks on top of the poster.
Okay.
So, that's kind of where the collectability gets, really elevated, and so that's kind of like where the money is in the collecting, or a lot of it is. So, I would, draw, like, an extra illustration over the poster, like, have it kind of interacting with the figure on the poster too, so or, have stuff come out of the figure, things like that. Or kind of like, change the font on top of the poster, and so, that's all a remark is,
And
really.
that's basically using pre-existing pieces you've already done.
Adam would just kind of, like, look through my feed or some of my older work, and then he would take those for the poster, but the remarks are yeah, that's the original painting on top of the poster.
Right. Have you done specific pieces like on request for Tool
Oh, yeah,
for some of
mhm.
these posters?
How do you mean
Well,
for
like,
the
okay, so
posters?
so so Adam's looking at some of your older work and says, "I like this one, I like this one, I like this one. We'd like to use those." Has that relationship moved forward such that he said, "Hey, want to create a new piece with this specific
The
thing in
first
mind?"
poster that I the oh, n not with, any particular image, nothing like that. No, he wouldn't,
Okay.
like, request any specific imagery.
No, but has he requested a painting specifically for a project without telling you what to
Oh,
do? Just can you create something for an
oh,
upcoming show or
not, the first poster I did was when he just asked me to make something original for them.
okay.
But he didn't give me any kind of creative direction or anything like that. So ever since, he's been requesting, like, older work, and so he would kind of curate them too, like, he would find, like, a handful of different images
For sure.
for, like, summer shows, so they would kind of, tie visually together. So he's been really great to work with in that he is really open and direct about what he's looking for,
Mhm.
or if he's not looking for anything in particular, we'll kind of, like, go through my work together to find things that sort of fit, and
I mean, I love that they do that.
yeah, yeah, I do too. I
I know they're
yeah.
not the only band that does that, but,
Mhm.
for some reason, maybe just because 'cause I've been a huge Tool fan forever, and
Oh, yeah.
so I'm focused on and it seems that the
Cool.
imagery that they tend to choose is the art that I tend to like.
Yeah. Oh,
you
nice.
know,
Yeah.
which, I
Yeah.
mean, aesthetically, I guess that makes a certain amount of sense.
Hmm. Yeah. And yeah, we follow all the same artists too. And so, yeah, that's been, yeah, it's great to see artists that I've shown with and recognized and know, like to see them in posters too. And so it's like this very cool community in a way, very loose knit, but also kind of like tied together. And it's great to be a part of it. And yeah, I'm really happy.
If you're enjoying this conversation, please make sure you hit that follow button so you never miss an episode. If you're watching on YouTube, please like this video, leave a comment, and if you haven't already, please subscribe. It's the quickest way to grow our channel, and it's absolutely free. You can also subscribe to our other channels on social media. Check out our Instagram at Creative Asylum CA, that's the letter CA, or on TikTok at The Creative Asylum, that's all one word. Our website is thecapod.com, and our Facebook profile is the same, facebook.com/thecapod. All right, back to the episode. So over the last decade, or maybe since the beginning of the pandemic, or whatever arbitrary marker you pick as you've continued to work, how has your work changed? What have you noticed, either in terms of your process or your themes or just your style? How have things developed over time? Because I assume with any artist really that is just something that organically happens.
Yeah. I think that's the post 9/11 stuff I did,
Hmm.
kind of like these Victorian fairy tales called The Miscreants of Tiny Town. It was like meant to be like kind of children's book illustrations. And it was kind of about those undercurrents of fascism that I just saw, like kind of in the country at the time. And then it was like in 2015 when Trump got elected, it was sort of like that those undercurrents of fascism kind of were just out in the public now. It's like, oh, here it is. And so those children characters that I had, like almost just spontaneously, I wasn't really thinking about it, but they kind of exploded. Like narratively, visually, I just started incorporating like guts and I think it was like maybe based on some of the combat footage I had, I'd stumbled on. But also it was like I wanted it to be like kind of this expulsion of like kind of cathartic emotion. And so I made these sort of psychedelic guts and body parts. And it was like these children were sprouting or spontaneously mutating. And so they kind of like became still lifes. And so I was really obsessed with that idea of like, oh, the fascism is happening. These kids are spontaneously mutating into something else. They're like mid transformation. And though we don't really know what like the final form these kids are going to take are going to be, we're kind of like left as still images to like look at the eruption kind of. And so I like worked on that like for a number of years.
I kind of remember that period, kind of going,
Yeah.
he's leaning into the gore a lot. I'm like, this is
Uh-huh.
interesting.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's, very much so, and then I think, like, during the pandemic, that also, like, just kind of changed where everything was just so ambiguous, and we were just in, like, a stasis, and so that's like I said, that's kind of like a time when I was, like, able to really sort of focus on the technical aspects of painting and different techniques, and so then I was getting more into, like, experimenting with figures, and then that kind of turned into kinda like creepy erotic stuff,
Hmm.
um, and different ways to, like, kinda escape from the stuff that I was working on or to, like, veer away and kind of go down different aisles, so, like, the children, when they stopped being children, they kind of, like, became more, like, just kinda grown up adult figures, and so I was, like, going back into those older references like the Orthodox icons kind of things and, trying to show or just more formal, figurative style techniques, like because I was teaching myself how to paint again, I think. So it's like using like these adult figures as just kind of blank slates more than anything else. They were kind of like it was working on poses and overarching narrative of like either those exploding children or like the fairy tale stuff that kind of evaporated, and I was just kind of like looking for different themes to work on or focus on. So then yeah, things kind of got too wildy or too unfocused.
Uh-huh.
And I'm kind of like I'm kind of getting back into honing in on things again. But that's mostly, and so then I think the figures kind of became more like centaurs or mixed creatures, or I was just kind of playing around with figures again. I think that's kind of
Right.
where that happened. But now I'm kind of getting back into themes and stuff like that. Also, I think what kind of made me veer away from core ideas that I had was that I was just like showing in galleries a lot. And so I would be making work for their themed group shows that they would have. So I'm kind of like, that's sort of where things kind of became, my work became like products and things that had to like hurry up and be finished and shipped. And
Right,
so
right,
I
right.
was working on fitting into deadlines more than kind of like exploring ideas. So yeah. So that's kind of where things have changed a lot.
How is that for you? I mean, I know there's a freedom for not having to have deadlines,
Yeah.
but I mean, what a great benefit to be showing so much that you have to be working towards the next show because you're selling so much work. I mean, it's
Yeah.
great. So
Yeah. Yeah.
when you like have a show coming up, and I assume you can only paint so much, so you can only do so many
Yeah.
shows in a year. When you talk to a gallery and they say they want to do a show, I assume they let you know the number of pieces or
Mhm.
the general size limitations and all of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you kind of begin to approach or start to prepare for a show, you know you have X number of pieces that you're going to have to deliver by such and such a date. Do you just start with a painting at a time and start, or maybe you work on a few different ones at a time? But like, do you kind of conceive of the entire body of work before you start, or do you just kind of have a general idea and start working on a couple and sort of
Mhm.
let the ideas come in as you're working on the body? Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, that's with the solo shows that I've had, and like I said, I try to think of them as like an album of work. The hardest part is um kind of assembling just like the arc, I guess, or deciding what concept I want to work toward, what kind of feeling that I want to express, or kind of like a kernel of an emotion that I want to hold on to throughout the whole thing. And so because there's so much that I just want to hone in on, just one idea that I want to focus on, that changes week after week. And so if I am invited to do a solo show that's due 6 months to 8 months to a year out, I will I'll go week by week and just kind of stress out about an idea and scrap it and then think about something else and doodle that kind of thing, or and then scrap those ideas or hold on to them or make notes about them. And so then I'll be zoned in working on the prep work and the doodles, and then all of a sudden, oh my god, I've only got a few more months to like actually put these together.
Oh shit.
Yeah, so that's been a real challenge over the past few years. um but then like once like that solid core is, once I'm confident in that, then the all the paintings, just putting that together, that just kind of feels like gardening. It's all, I'm just like now I'm just working, and now I'm just putting the ideas together.
So your process for putting together a show has a great deal to do with the prep work as opposed to the
Yeah.
actual cooking on the stove, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that I kind of noticed that when I was like kind of starting watercoloring and taking that seriously, like only making paintings that is just watercoloring. So that like kind of taught me how to properly stretch watercolor paper, how to mask it off, how to do that kind of level of prep work, just to put the first, all that stuff that's required just before you even like put like a mark down.
Right.
And so then I kind of like saw that about, everything that we look at, the buildings and, parks and stuff. You don't see all of the zoning codes that go into it, and all like the hole that's dug before the building is made, and
Yeah.
like all that kind of stuff. And so uh, watercoloring like really taught me to respect that part of it. And
Interesting.
well, yeah, so that's where I put like all the energy into a show. And so I think like this past year was me wanting to get back to just like enjoying the process of actually painting. And so a lot of my work this fall and winter is going to be kind of the result of that, I think.
Is that something you can viably do, considering that you now have the attention of galleries and upcoming shows? And
Mhm.
like, it almost seems like you have to decide to like, no, I'm not going to do that for a while because I want to go do this. Like, it almost sounds like you want to get back to just the joy of the creativity for that sake unto itself, as opposed to the process and the prep. And I mean, either way, your work is all incredibly composed. So I'm assuming you spent a lot of time honing and fine tuning the basic ideas of the composition before you actually start the piece.
Yeah, that's another really big part of it too. Yeah.
And I assume and hope you keep all of your sketches.
My sketches are awful. I remember like
Really?
they're terrible. They're less than stick figures.
Okay.
So I remember
So you get the basic composition, and then once you have the main piece, that's where you really kind of
yeah, it's really just blocking in
interesting.
just for the elements that I want. Yeah. And so like my sketches, if you could call them that, are like a loose mark and an arrow pointing where I want the eye contact to be or where I want the hands to be.
I would have assumed the exact opposite
Oh,
because your stuff is so specific and articulate and just detailed, you know.
well, yeah, I think a lot of that once those really simple building blocks are made, then that is kind of where the gardening process comes in, and then I just sort of fill in the ideas around that core idea.
Wow. To be an artist.
Uh-huh.
I I like to think of myself an artist, and then if I ever get too close to that thought, I'm like, imposter syndrome.
Well, the imposters that doesn't go away.
I mean
That's constantly where it is.
maybe that's a question for you, just like that word, what does that word mean to you? And I don't even mean specifically in terms of like visual art, but just the process of being a creative person and what an artist means. When somebody says, "Are you an artist?" I'm like, "Yeah, not really." I've done
Yeah.
a couple of things, but
Uh-huh.
then if I think more broadly about what does it mean to be an artist, what does it mean to live a creative life?
Yeah, I think when I start these podcasts in particular, that's like where all of that anxiety comes in. Like, I shouldn't be here talking about this. I don't. I Everything that I'm saying is so inarticulate and stumbly, and not what people would expect a full time artist to say. And so, I like that natural like imposter syndrome immediately crashes in. So it's like it's always hard for me to call myself an artist. It's
Uh huh.
impossible, and it's like I kind of have to because
You're making a living making art.
yeah, it's literally all, it's what I'm doing, and
Yeah,
it's on my
yeah.
taxes. It's how so
So where do you think that comes from? So where does that whole thing of like, but I'm making my life doing art? Like, of course you are. You know.
yeah, I think there are so many reasons for it, just culturally, regionally. I think maybe that comes from being in the Midwest or coming from like kind of a small town where I had like support and I had encouragement.
Uh-huh.
But I wasn't like, from a family of artists. So I wasn't surrounded by that. And also I think just culturally, socially, just nowadays, these days, and maybe it's just like kind of a modern thing, the idea of being an artist that's such like a rich person's kind of pursuit, or maybe it used to be seen like that.
I think the exact opposite.
Uh, like
I
how
Well, I think pursuing art is actually a poor person's pursuit because
yeah, right. Yeah, that's the irony for sure.
most
Yeah.
of the artists I know are not rich people, you know,
Uh-huh.
or even
Yeah.
even the artists I know that are successful in terms of, you know, they're like you able to make your living doing your art or whatever the art is. To me, that's first of all phenomenal and fantastic.
Mm.
But I don't assume that you have 4 different houses in different parts of the country or anything like
Yeah,
that,
right. The
right?
idea
You
of
know?
making a living,
Yeah.
I've had to adapt what a living is. Like, I don't, I live a pretty Spartan, life. I live out of my art studio. I've had to sacrifice way more than like take in. Now I've just like my summers now are that's usually when I'm working on stuff for the fall. So I'm not like making any income. I can at least live off of that. But it's
Right.
that idea of like making a living or being a success or something. I'm still aspiring to that, I guess, or I'm still like, it still feels like such a pipe dream,
Uh-huh.
even though like compared to where I was just a few years ago or 10 years ago or whatever, I have completely surpassed my wildest expectations from that, but I mean it's still like considering where the world is and where all the pressures are coming and all these different pressure points are like kind of bumping into each other. I have no idea where things are going to be in a year or a few months, and I guess nobody does. So I guess I'm just I'm working, and that's all I can do. I guess
I mean, I feel like if you've reached, say, the point that you've reached where you have, I mean, how many shows can you do a year? 2?
more than that.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I've got two solo shows in Washington
Uh-huh. State?
in November. Yeah, Washington State.
Okay.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
one in Spokane and then another in Seattle.
Okay.
But now I've had multiple group shows every month this year.
Wow, really?
Yeah, so I've been working on that stuff for my solo shows at the end of the year, but
Mhm.
also doing just trying to keep up with commissions and all that
Right.
other.
So the point I was leading to was that you've reached this point, which a lot of artists would, cut off their pinky just to get to the point where you're at. You've developed a following. You've got collectors. So from here, yes, you don't know where it's going to be in 2 years, but I think you can probably pretty realistically look at a path that is, however gradual it might be, continuing to be on an upslope. I mean, I think the hardest part is getting to a point where you can just make some kind of living. And then once you do that, I think, it continues to grow for
Mm,
I hope for most artists.
yeah, that's the hope. Yeah.
Let me ask you this. What would you, if you were not able to make a living doing your art, what would you be doing?
I would be probably in some kind of a home. Like this is so much a necessary, like psychologically necessary place to be. As much as it stresses me out, and as much as I know it's like aging me at a pretty steady clip, but if I didn't have it, I really don't know what I could do that wouldn't have that in there. Like, when I was getting my bachelor's back in the '90s, my bachelor's degree, I asked, like, one of my professors, like, "So what can a bachelor's of fine arts degree, like, get me?" And he went, "Well, McDonald's, maybe a frame shop." And he was totally right. And I don't have my master's, but that was something that was always there.
Was that the degree you pursued? Was in fine art?
Yeah, fine art and
Okay.
art history, yeah, but
Okay.
I just got, like, my bachelor's and then, moved to New York right after I graduated.
Right. And then move back.
Yeah, yep. Yep, and then just absolutely floundered for more than a few years. That I think, like, that's where things just got so dark and, I was showing, occasionally in some coffee shops here and there, but I was
Right.
just kind of doing, like, data center sort of customer service work or, tech support work in a cubicle, and it was just driving me just crazy, and I just not having
Soulless,
that
right?
direction. Yeah, and it was just it's my whole life, my whole childhood, like all that. It was like I was so intent and focused on uh just processing the world through my drawings and illustrations, like I said at the beginning, and then to not have that focus in that kind of work was really just taking a toll on me. And then, like, I just was like, "Fuck it, I'm doing this full time." Or I think I made, I made like an $800 sale on Etsy or something like that, or I made like $800, and I'm like, "Oh, hey, I made it.
Uh-huh.
I'm out of here, man. Take your job and shove it." And then all those sales just dried right up, and then I was just many years in just terror, but I was doing it.
I think you have to make that leap of faith at some point.
I think that's what did it was just yeah.
As we're winding down, I mean, let me ask you, just even though that prospect, and it probably even still lingers, even though it's maybe unrealistic at this point, that prospect still lingers that, oh God, what if everything dries up? There's still something that continues to drive you forward and keeps you focused on that creative thing that,
Yeah.
I mean, you have a genuine gift and ability that most people don't have,
Well,
and your work is such a unique kind of point of view and kind of a distinct set of universes, or maybe it's all
mm,
one universe. I don't know,
yeah, I think so.
but what is that thing for you that always keeps you on the path that you're on, creating the art that you're making?
Yeah. When I was working full time as an artist and still really struggling and doing like a art crawl studio tours like out of my studio here,
Yep.
it was so more than the sales, much infinitely more than the sales. It was making connections with people. Even if my sales were terrible back then, or we didn't like meet what I needed them to meet, uh, it was that human connection that was so validating and so important. And it wasn't just like getting the compliments, even though that was really important. But I mean, it was just like meeting people in the field or just meeting people just off the street or something like that. And to be able to have my work start a conversation in those early days was so necessary to keep me going. Just that strangers were appreciating what I was doing, or that they felt something, or that it reminded them of something from their own childhood, or some kind of emotion that they could relate to, was the reason to keep going. And then now I think going into it, since I am so absolutely no longer qualified to be in any workforce at all, I am not qualified to do any job because I do this stuff almost 24 hours a day, it feels like. And I'm in my studio working the entire day. That now it's kind of become like like almost like my primary way of communicating with people. Like just visually, just a few after a few months, I'll put some stuff online and then make some comments about it, and then I'll sort of disappear again. And that's a really hermetic kind of way to live, and that's how it feels. Like I'll walk to my coffee shop to get some coffee, and the sunlight would come out, and I'd just be like, oh. But now it's just become such a part of my life right now that I wouldn't know. I have no idea how to stop doing it.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of The Creative Asylum. A quick favor before you go. If you liked this conversation, please be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. New episodes drop every Tuesday at 10. You can find us on Instagram and on YouTube at Creative Asylum CA. That's Creative Asylum and the letters CA. Our website is thecapod.com. And our Facebook is the same, facebook.com/thecapod. Until next week, when we'll have a new conversation with another creative disruptor, stay creative in life and at work.